So today we're going to be talking about what you leave behind. And one of those things people think about when they're thinking about what to leave behind is writing a memoir or writing down their experiences. Well, I used to teach a class on this. So we're going to talk about things you should consider, what you need to think about, and how you get it done. Coming up next. Hi everybody, my name is Dee Burks and this is Retirement Rescue, where we talk about how to make money, save money, and create a retirement from nothing. Well, one of the video suggestions I've had from you all is how to write a memoir, or how do you write down different stories about your life and about your family. Well, I used to teach a class on writing a memoir. I taught it at Amarillo College for a number of years. I also taught it as a class out at the Craig Methodist Retirement Center in Amarillo. I've taught it several different places. I've even taught one locally. And people always want to know, okay, how do you even do that? How do you start a memoir? What do you need to include? Well, there's several things you need to think about if you're thinking about writing a memoir. First and foremost, you don't need to be a writer. You don't need to be able to spell. You don't need to be able to do any of that stuff. You don't have to have a computer. You can write it out on a legal pad. Honestly, that's what my dad does. He's dyslexic. His spelling is not great. But let me tell you what, the stories are. That's what your kids and your grandkids and your great-grands will care about, is the story. They're not going to care about how it got written, or if the paper was perfect, or if it was on a computer or not. In fact, if you do write it out on a computer, I always tell people, always print out your pages. Be sure someone can find them. If you're writing something on a computer and they don't access that computer or don't even realize it's there, it could go away and never be seen. Always print out your pages. Now, if you're thinking about if you should write a memoir or not, my answer is always yes. You are the only bridge your children, grandchildren, and people who come after you have to the past. It's easy for us to assume that our children remember the stuff we remember, but they were children. I even have to remind my parents about this. They'll say, oh, you remember so-and-so, when we lived at the ranch. I was 4. Y'all, I don't remember nothing. I remember our dog's name. That's about it. Okay? So some of those things that you remember and you assume your children remember, they don't remember it the same way you do, if they remember it at all. You are the bridge to connect them to their own past as well as yours. They're not going to know all these things about you. They're not going to understand what it was like when you were a child. They don't have memories of your parents and grandparents the way you do. So writing these things down from your perspective is really important for the future. It is not unusual, and I'm sure you all have had this experience, for when you had your grandparents and even your great-grandparents, you were young. You didn't realize what a resource they could have been. You didn't ask them all the questions about the things you would love to know about their life. Now they're gone. Don't let that happen to you and your family. You can do something about it. Now, when I talk to people about writing a memoir, inevitably, most of them will say, well, my life wasn't that interesting. It's not that special. Wrong. It is special. You have lived through decades, experiences, movements, economic issues that your children won't know about or relate to. They won't have any idea what that is other than reading about it in a history book. They would rather know how you lived it. And let me give you an example of this. My parents were both raised very differently. One was a city kid, one was a complete country kid, poor country kid. They had very different backgrounds, very different raisings. I experienced both. My children, however, have been mostly raised in the city. Those are very different lifestyles, very different in the way you approach things and the things you're exposed to. So writing down what you remember and what was important to you and the things you learned through your life is one of the best gifts you can give to your family. If you're one of those people that knows you're not going to leave a lot behind for your family, write down your experiences. Write down your life story. Even if you don't think it's important, they will. They will have wished they had asked you these questions. They will have wished they knew more about you as a person. Now let me give you some examples of this. When I was teaching this at the Craig Methodist Center, there were, here again, a whole group of men and women both. But one of the ladies had said, well, you know, my life isn't anything special. It's not anything. Come to find out, she was raised in Miami in the 20s. Her father was a civil engineer and built their house. They had a major hurricane when she was a young person. And she said she remembers walking out and everyone else's house was gone and theirs was still standing. I mean, how incredible is that? She also got to go to the nightclubs and experience the culture of Miami during the Art Deco phase. It wasn't like going to South Beach and just seeing that architecture and wondering what it was like. She was there. And she thought it was nothing special. There are many people in the town that I live in now that come from a long line of coal miners. They were immigrants. They don't think their life is special either because everyone around them also came from coal miners. That is a very unusual background. A lot of people have no idea what that life was like. What a gift to leave your kids and grandkids. So don't think just because you don't think your life was special that other people won't. They absolutely will. And this is becoming more of an interest level all the time as the DNA ancestry type websites are around. Information about previous family members are being put online all the time. And if you're not around for them to ask, what about this and what happened here and who is this person, they have nobody to go to. All they have are pictures and government records. And that does not really tell a story. Now, I also tell people, you don't have to write a book. You can just write little episodes about different things that happened in your life. And when I teach this class, I usually have, every class is a 6-week class. I have a series of handouts and we start at childhood. And these handouts contain question after question about childhood. What was a day in your life like? What was your relationship with your siblings? Because while you know your parents' siblings all as adults, you've always known them as adults, they were very different as children. Some were older, some were younger. They had a different relationship. You know, what experiences did they have with their siblings? A lot of people really love the stories about, oh, that time you almost died. We all have those stories, y'all, especially those of us who lived a farm life. And as siblings, your parents don't necessarily know those stories, so you can tell your children things that happened to you as a child that even your parents don't know. But I start out with these series of handouts asking all kinds of questions. And we generally go through each phase of life. And that's a great plan if you're planning to write your memoir. What was high school like for you? What was your first car? When did you get your first kiss and from whom? What was it like a day in the life of a high schooler in 1950 or in 1960? What was it like? Depending on your age, maybe you remember, as my parents do, because they were in high school in Dallas. Where were you when John Kennedy was shot? Most people that age remember that. They remember it distinctly. What happened, you know, and they'll tell you. And it's a great story depending on where they were, how they felt. Those sorts of world changes that happened during their lifetime, they will have really stark memories of, and you will too. So write those down. But you can progress through every phase of your life. Now I will warn you about some things. There are people who were traumatized by what happened to them. Maybe they had a parent go to prison. Maybe someone was killed. There are things that are traumatizing, and they are traumatizing to those people. However, they're not going to necessarily be traumatizing to family members that come after them because they didn't really have that close personal relationship. And here again, with all the ancestry sites, court records, everything being put online, there are no secrets anymore, or there's very few. So often it's really good to talk about those things, whether they were positive or negative, and really give your perspective on them and how it affected you as a person. That can be very insightful for your grandchildren to know who you are. And by the way, this is really true for a lot of type A personalities. They start listing the highlights of their life like it's a resume. That is not what your children and grandchildren want to know. Think about the times your children come to you. When do they come to you needing your advice? When they lost a job? When they were trying to decide whether to move cross country? When they were in the middle of marital problems or maybe a divorce? When they had a child that was sick? Talk to your children when you write your memoir just like you would if they were coming to you for advice. Talk to them about the mistakes you made. Talk to them about regrets you have. Talk to them about how, even though you couldn't see it at the time, how things worked out for you for the best, even though you were scared to make those decisions. That's what your children want to know. They want to see the humanness in you. They want to understand you're just like they are. You didn't have all the answers. We grow up thinking our parents, our grandparents, boy, they had it all figured out. We don't. And your kids need to know that. They need to know that they're doing fine. And you can do that by sharing your memories, sharing your family knowledge. Be sure and label the family pictures of who's in the picture. That was a big one for us. We had all these people in pictures and no one knew who they were. So, take care of that. Fill in some of those gaps and let them know it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to exist. You can't do anything with a blank page. So start today and get those memories down on paper, and your kids will be very, very grateful down the road. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please click subscribe, and I'll see you next time.